Is it
course.
okay to drink water as we go through?
Of course.
Yeah,
Come on,
okay.
we're letting our hair down.
A little bit of it.
But yeah, anyway, good evening, and I'm back. I've got Kevin again. I've not had him for a couple of months, is it?
Yeah, a good few months. Yeah, nice to speak again.
It is. And obviously we spoke about mental health last time. Tonight, CBT. Not CBD, CBT.
CBT, quite different. Both of them are quite nice, apparently, but it's quite different, CBT.
Yes. Now, obviously, cognitive behavioural therapy.
Yeah.
Never say that when you're half asleep.
That's right. Easy to say CBT.
You'll fail every time saying it. So we need to know, what is it and how does it affect us?
Yeah, it's a very popular form of therapy these days, and certainly in the National Health Service, it's very popular. So if somebody goes to see their GP with anxiety, depression, worry, stuff like that, very often the GP will prefer to refer the person for CBT rather than give them antidepressants and anti-anxiety medication straight off. So they'll often refer the person for CBT. So CBT, cognitive behavior therapy. So basically, to break those three words down gives us a description of what it is. The cognitive part of it is to do with how we think and the beliefs that we have. And the behavioral part of it is, of course, the behaviors that we have. And the therapy is, of course, the therapeutic part of it. And basically, in a nutshell, the idea is that the CBT therapist gets to understand the issues, the problems that the client is presenting with, and then they help them to explore the cognitive aspects of it. So looking at the client's thinking style and how they're thinking and their beliefs that they're having. And if those thoughts and beliefs are unhelpful and are helping to make the person feel quite depressed, the therapist will then gradually support the individual to find more helpful, supportive, better feeling ways of thinking.
Yeah.
And the behavioral part of it is looking at the part that behavior plays in, for example, the person who's feeling depressed. So, for example, if an individual is depressed, very often they'll turn off their phone, they'll leave the curtains closed, they won't get out of bed in the morning, they'll stay in bed all day if they're feeling quite depressed. And we know that these behaviors will antagonize the depression, make it much worse than it otherwise is. So the therapist will help that person to change their behaviors. So in a nutshell, it's changing the thoughts and beliefs, helping to change the behaviors in a way to bring about a therapeutic outcome.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously I don't know that much into it because I've not really looked much into it myself, but I know that if people, because I know they have the anxiety symptom in them and they don't want to go and see a professional. So the home remedy, what can they do?
I mean, from a CBT perspective, any of the self-help books, for example, there's a whole range of really good books. I forget the authors' names, but they're, if you type a Google search, you'll find them. Overcoming Anxiety with CBT, Overcoming Depression with CBT, Overcoming Panic Attacks with CBT.
Yeah.
And these self-help books are really, really good, and they explain CBT and then they help you to implement CBT for yourself. But basically, to answer your question, what we would recommend in CBT is supporting the individual to find out, to explore some of those thoughts that they're having that lead to depressed feelings or anxious feelings, for example, and to begin to challenge those. Okay.
Yeah.
It's not always as easy as that. You know, it takes persistence, it takes practice, because very often we have these habits that we all carry around with us, myself included, where we perhaps think in a way that helps to create anxiety and worry for us. And it's about getting to grips with those thoughts and gradually changing them for more helpful, constructive ways of thinking.
Absolutely. Because straight away when I was asking that, meditation, because that can help as well, I
Absolutely.
think. Yeah, because I know there's different types of meditation. Like if you go on YouTube, that's just going to be a relaxing technique. That's not meditation. That's what I've learned. But it's still good though. Still good.
Yeah.
But I've now learned since lockdown, since I've had those depressive moments, I've changed my routine massively, where I've now woken up 2 cuppas when I used to only have 1, a cold shower, whatever the weather, cold shower because that drains it all out of you, and meditate for 10 minutes, which I've now pushed up to 15. So, yeah.
Excellent. That's really good. That's really good. And I think it's a really valid point that you make about this whole pandemic period that we're going through at the moment.
Yeah.
And it changes, most of us, have had to change our daily, weekly, monthly, annual schedules. And on the face of it, that doesn't sound too bad. Well, okay, we have to change stuff. But then when you really think about it, it can be quite unsettling that, you can't plan a holiday. You can't sometimes plan when you're going to go back to work. You can't move house if you already plan to move house. There's a whole range of things that you can't plan. Sometimes you can't even plan to go and see your own parents. If you have to isolate or, they have to isolate, for example. So not being able to plan really does strike at the core of many of us, myself included.
Yeah.
And it can lead to feelings of insecurity and uncertainty. And when there's uncertainty, we often feel anxious as a result.
Yeah, because obviously, as we were saying before we came on, keep away from the news because you don't know when they're telling the truth or when they're telling absolute lies. About 95% of the time, it's lies. But they'll say that for a different day. But when they mention the word social distance, I have not once ever listened to that. Because I know I've said this many times, but I felt more social connected when I'm speaking to people online. LinkedIn, Zoom, Facebook, it doesn't matter. There's groups out there and there's always people to talk to.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. One of the things that happens with watching the news, for example, is that we're encouraged to focus on the bad stuff that's going on in relation to coronavirus. And one of the thinking errors in CBT, we have a number of what we call thinking errors, which are ways of thinking that are not helpful for us. And they're very often not accurate either. So one of those thinking errors is focusing on the negatives. Yeah. And as you can imagine, if we focus on the negative stuff all the time, you start to feel negative. We feel depressed or sad. If you turn on the news and watch it for an hour or 2 hours, it's a constant bombardment to the senses of negativity. Number of people who have died, number of people who got the virus, the lack of protective equipment in the hospitals, the problems, whatever, it goes on and on.
Yeah.
And if you just focus on that, you can start to believe that the world is in a dreadful state and there's no hope for the future. But actually, once you switch that off, as you said, you switch off that TV and try and balance the stuff that comes into your mind.
Yeah.
Some negative stuff will get in there, but also feed yourself positivity as well.
Yeah. Self-care. Absolutely self-care. I would never dream of self-care for almost 3 weeks. And I've come back stronger than ever. Stronger, more healthier. Just in the mind as well. Because obviously mental health, whatever you've got, depression, anxiety, CBT, it all starts with the mind. Because it controls the way we think, act and behave. And that's how I describe mental health. But obviously we all see it in our different ways.
Sure.
So what do we say now about CBT? Just keep going. That's all I say.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And one of the things in CBT as well is that what is supposed to underlie cognitive behavior therapy is that during the sessions with the therapist, it's not about the therapist treating the individual and healing them or making them feel better about themselves or whatever. It shouldn't be about that at all. But what it is about is helping the individual gain the skills, the knowledge, the understanding, excuse me, to make changes for themselves and to manage their own mood without the need for a therapist. So we call it kind of a combined approach, and that's the idea, that we help people to gain a whole range of skills so they can take care of their own mood in the future without always having to go back to the therapist.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, obviously, professionals, it never worked for me, but that doesn't mean it worked with others. Now, obviously, this is why I opened a group on Facebook called the Warriors of Mental Health, because that's how we describe how we all are. We're all warriors in our own mind, in our own lives. And it's time to take action and take control of this. Because I believe mental health, that's the real pandemic here. Because a lot more people need to start talking about it and cut the stigma.
Absolutely.
Stigma.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you make a very valid point there that CBT is not for everybody, and some people don't really get on well with CBT, and that's absolutely fine. There are many different therapies out there. Some people prefer, their own self-directed learning and therapeutic stuff, and that's great as well. There's not one size that fits all people, so yeah.
So if you've got advice to give someone who's just spotted that they've got CBT, what would it be?
How do you mean if they're going to be attending CBT?
If they've just been diagnosed with it and they don't know where to turn to or anything like that.
Sure. I mean, whenever you get a diagnosis, it's always good to talk to the individual that makes the diagnosis and get the full details of it. And then I always encourage independent learning as well. So you gain back some of that power from medical professionals, and you gain knowledge and insight into the issue, whatever that issue is. Let's say it's an anxiety disorder, for example. If a doctor or psychiatrist says, okay, Kevin, you have an anxiety disorder, the first thing I will want to do is to say, okay, what's the treatment for this? How can I help myself? What is it that I can do to help alleviate this? And also, can you recommend a good, easy to read self-help book for this so I can get to work on it,
Yeah.
And in that way, for me, I begin to feel more empowered then. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I don't have to keep going back to the GP. I want to learn all there is to learn about this condition, about this issue, and see what I can do. And it's, it's a learning process. It's a learning process. It's a learning opportunity. And that's a very helpful CBT-ish way to look at a diagnosis. It's an opportunity for us to grow and to learn and to understand this thing that has been bothering us, and to gain skills in, how we can begin to manage that as well.
I'm glad you brought that up because I actually watched the YouTube video just the other week, and obviously I'm saying this bluntly, for us to grow, we have to deal with shit.
That's right.
Now, obviously, because obviously compost, it's made of it, and obviously it's a bit of sun, bit of water, and it starts to grow. Plants start to grow, those seeds.
Right.
Now, if we're practically the same as that. We're like a plant as well. We deal with shit. We grow.
That's right. It promotes growth. That's right. And we all go through it as well in different ways. Everybody. you know, even the psychiatrists and the doctors and the therapists, they have their own stuff to deal with as well.
Yeah.
And as you know, some Americans say, shit happens, and it's true. Life does present us with challenges.
Same with British people, we say it as well.
That's right. We've picked it up from the Americans, I think. But yeah, shit happens, as they say. But the thing is, what do we do with that? From a CBT, cognitive behavioral perspective, when the shit happens, what do we do? Do we sit back and feel engulfed and overwhelmed by it? Or do we kind of stand up and begin to learn about it and gain skills into how to manage it and even to alleviate it, you know? And but first of all, to use it for our growth, you know? So again, central to cognitive therapy, one of the central ideas is that shit happens, as we've been saying, but then the main difference is how do we respond to that? We can't stop shit from happening.
No.
We can't stop, you know, rude people on the bus. We can't stop, I don't know, unhelpful people in the supermarket. We can't stop a boss who's always complaining and being negative. We can't change other people. What we can do is begin to respond in a different way to these challenging situations, in a way that makes us feel better, you know?
Exactly, because obviously, as the saying goes, you can't change others, but you can change yourself.
That's right, absolutely.
Yeah, and another one I've learned is actually trees. Now, obviously, people's going to be thinking, why is he going on about trees when it comes to CBT? Well, in fact, there's actually some similarities there, even just mental health in general, because once a year, leaves fall off trees. Every year, no ifs, no buts about that. But the tree still stands tall, waiting for better days.
That's right, absolutely.
That's where the similarity comes in.
Yeah, and just thinking of a tree as well, one of the things we try one of the skills we try to help people gain in providing cognitive therapy for them is flexibility. And a bit like the tree in the storm, when the high winds blow, shit happens, as they say.
Yeah.
The high winds blow. The very rigid trees that are just not flexible, guess what happens? They snap in two and they break. But the trees that can bend this way and then bend that way in the strong winds, and they're flexible and they chop and they change like that, they're the trees that are going to be around for a very long time. And they manage the shit, as they say, much better.
There you go.
Do you know what I
There
mean?
you go. There you go. That's similarities between mental health and nature.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know where we can go from here. If you've got anything else to say.
Sure. I could tell you that cognitive behavioral therapy was developed in the 1960s by an American psychiatrist called Aaron Beck. And he began life as a doctor, as a psychoanalyst, using Freudian kind of therapy, where, you know, very often the therapist would sit for many weeks, months, and even years, helping the individual to retrace their life right through their childhood and go back into the past all the time. One of the things that he noticed is that his clients that were being treated for depression, many of them didn't recover, didn't get better, and didn't describe their moods as improving. And another thing he noticed was that those same clients that were depressed, that weren't making very much improvement, tended to speak in very negative, unhelpful ways toward themselves and about the world and the future, for example. So that got him thinking, well, maybe it's more to do with the thoughts playing a part in how the individuals are feeling.
Yeah.
So how about if we start to change the way that people think? Not in a brainwashing kind of way, but just in a helpful, supportive way yourself.
Absolutely.
You know? So anyway, cognitive therapy was born or developed through that. through that.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
it is a very helpful therapy. I'll give you an example of how I used CBT right from when I first finished training as a CBT therapist. I trained as a further education teacher shortly afterwards. And so I did the several days per week on the teacher training. And then after a few months, the teachers would say, okay, we're going to split you into separate colleges, and you have to actually go and teach psychology in these further education colleges for 2 days per week. And then that's the practical part of your course. And I was absolutely petrified. I was very anxious. I thought, oh my gosh, I've never stood up in front of 34 people before. Teenagers, 16 to 18-year-olds teaching A-level psychology. And I was very anxious. And the very first day I had to go to this college in the West Midlands and teach this very first class. I was walking down the corridor of this college, and I had all my papers and booklets in my hand and stuff. And I felt so anxious. My heart was beating 10 to the dozen. I felt dry in the mouth, weak at the knees, typical anxiety symptoms, And at the same time, I was having all these anxiety-provoking thoughts going around in my mind. What if these students don't like me? What if they ask difficult questions that I don't have answers to? What if I get lost halfway through the lecture and I forget what I have to talk about? What if I make a fool of myself, etc., etc., etc.? All these catastrophic thoughts, and I felt very anxious as a result. As I got into the classroom, I was 10, 15 minutes early, and I set my books up on the desk and stuff like that. And then I used some of those CBT skills where you challenge these unhelpful thoughts. You see them for what they are and you challenge them. And I said to myself, well, I can't be liked by all the people all of the time, that's for sure, And some students might choose that don't really like Kevin. And that's fine, I would prefer people to like me, but I can't make people like me, That's not the way the world works. And then I thought to myself, about making any mistakes, it's okay to make mistakes, and I mustn't be hard on myself about it. It's the first day that I've ever taught a class. If I make a few mistakes, it's absolutely to be expected, and mistakes are part of the learning process.
Yeah.
So what I'm doing there is I'm challenging these unhelpful thoughts and replacing them with more helpful, constructive, realistic thoughts. And I began to feel more relaxed in that space of those 10 minutes before students arrived. And, I'm happy to say that very first lecture went quite well. I did make a couple of mistakes, but there you go. I'm a human.
Exactly. If we don't make mistakes, we're not human.
That's right.
Exactly.
It's good to make mistakes. It's important.
Absolutely. I'm still making them today. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I hope I never stop making mistakes. I hope I always learn something from the mistakes, but I hope I never stop making mistakes, because then the learning stops and the growing stops.
Yeah, it does. Anyway, thanks for coming on.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me. Nice talking to you again.
Again, yeah. And we will do this again at some point. I know I'm doing a mental health day on the 10th of October. And if you're interested in coming on, you're more than welcome. There's going to be a group of us. So, yeah.
Okay. Is it a discussion on the 10th?
It's a discussion, yeah. It's a discussion.
Yeah. Oh, perfect. Yeah. Let me know, and I'll be happy if I can attend that. I'll be happy to.
Yeah, 10th of October, and it will be round about 10:30 our UK night.
10:30?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, because obviously I've got a couple of Australians coming on as well, so that'll be good.
Oh, see, that's right. Their time zone is quite different.
It's going to be about 7, 8 o'clock in the morning their time. So.
Okay. Okay, that makes sense, huh?
Yeah. Well, what I'll do is, we'll talk between now and then anyway. So yeah.
No problem.
But anyway, yeah, great having you on.
You too. Thank you.
Anytime. Yeah.
Bye-bye.